The first impact didn't sound like an explosion. It sounded like the earth itself cracking open. At precisely 2:17 a.m. local time, a 30,000-pound bunker buster tore through reinforced concrete like it was wet clay. No warning, no alarm, no radar lock. Just a sudden, violent penetration that turned one of the most secure underground command facilities into a collapsing coffin. 8 seconds later, the second bomb followed. Same entry point, same trajectory. But this one didn't just penetrate, it finished the job. Deep beneath layers of steel, rock, and reinforced concrete, the shockwave expanded outward with unstoppable force. Walls folded inward. Oxygen vanished. Electronics died instantly. The entire command structure was erased before a single distress signal could escape. And above it all, nothing. No jets visible. No missiles detected. No radar signatures. Just empty sky. Because the aircraft responsible, the B-21 Raider, was never seen. High above the clouds, moving like a ghost through contested airspace, the bomber had already turned west. Its radar signature? Smaller than a golf ball. Its presence? Completely undetected. For the Iranian defense network, built on decades of layered systems and reinforced by Russian technology, the realization came too late. They weren't just attacked. They were outplayed. But this strike was only the opening move. While the underground facility was still collapsing into rubble, another operation was already unfolding hundreds of miles away. In the waters near the Strait of Hormuz, the sea began to shift. AUS, Carrier Strike Group, centered around one of the most powerful naval assets ever built, was accelerating toward the narrow maritime choke point. Destroyers moved in formation. Radar systems powered up. Electronic signatures flooded the region. And this time, they wanted to be seen. To Iranian coastal defense operators, the situation looked clear. A massive American fleet was approaching. Not stealthy, not hidden, not subtle, loud, obvious, aggressive. Exactly the kind of target they had spent decades preparing for. Within minutes, response protocols activated across multiple command centers. Missile batteries powered on. Fast attack craft were mobilized. Surveillance systems locked onto the incoming fleet. This was the war scenario they had rehearsed for 40 years. And now, it was finally happening. On their screens, the carrier silhouette was unmistakable. A giant moving fortress. To them, it wasn't just a ship. It was an opportunity. But what they didn't realize was that they were being guided into a trap. As Iranian forces focused their attention on the surface fleet, a silent message was transmitted far beyond the region. Moscow responded quickly. They understood the stakes, but they also understood the risk. Direct confrontation with the U.S. Navy was not an option, so they chose something else. Something quieter. Something deniable. Within hours, 2 advanced submarines slipped out of port under civilian cover. Designed for stealth, these vessels were known for one thing above all. They were nearly impossible to detect. Operating deep below thermal layers, where sonar becomes unreliable, they moved undisturbed through international waters, eventually reaching the mouth of the Strait of Hormuz. Their mission? Not to attack. Not yet. But to prepare the battlefield. On board these submarines was a new kind of weapon. Not the traditional naval mines of the past, but something far more advanced. Autonomous. Intelligent. Patient. Once deployed, these devices would rest silently on the ocean floor, listening. Waiting. Not for any ship, but for specific targets. They were programmed to recognize the unique acoustic signatures of high-value vessels, like cruisers and aircraft carriers. And once identified, they would activate. The plan was simple. Turn the strait into a kill zone. Force the U.S. Navy into a position where movement meant risk, and hesitation meant defeat. If even a single carrier was damaged, the entire operation could collapse. At least, that was the idea. But there was one problem. The Russians were preparing for a war that no longer existed. Weeks before this moment, long before any ships moved or bombs dropped, the United States had already begun shaping the environment. Quietly, patiently, invisible to everyone watching. Beneath the surface of the same waters, where the submarines now operated, something else had been placed. Dozens of small, autonomous underwater vehicles, each no larger than a human, each drifting slowly, each listening. These weren't weapons. They were sensors, floating ears in the ocean, and they had already detected everything. The moment the submarines entered the region, their acoustic signatures were picked up. Every propeller rotation, every movement, every shift in pressure, tracked, logged, analyzed, and transmitted. Back at command, the response was immediate, but not in the way you might expect. There was no interception, no attack, no warning. Instead, they did nothing. They allowed the submarines to proceed, to deploy their mines, to complete their mission. Because every single device placed on the ocean floor was being mapped in real time. Exact coordinates, exact positions, a complete blueprint of the entire minefield. What the Russians believed was a hidden trap had already been compromised. And by staying silent, the U.S. ensured one critical advantage. The enemy still believed they were invisible. Back on land, preparations continued. Iranian forces moved their most advanced air defense systems into position along the coastline. These systems were designed to detect and destroy stealth aircraft, high-speed targets, long-range tracking, advanced radar, everything needed to counter modern aerial threats. And soon enough, they believed they had won. A radar contact appeared, fast-moving, consistent, predictable, exactly what they were trained to engage. Orders were given, missiles launched. Within seconds, they were traveling at hypersonic speeds toward their target. Everything looked perfect, until the target vanished, then reappeared somewhere else, then split into multiple signals, then disappeared again. The radar operators watched in confusion. The system wasn't malfunctioning. It was being manipulated, because what they were seeing wasn't real. High above them, completely undetected, the same aircraft that had destroyed the underground facility was still operating. And now, it was doing something even more dangerous. It was rewriting the battlefield, using advanced electronic warfare systems. It intercepted incoming radar signals, processed them instantly, and sent back altered data, false targets, ghost signals, phantom aircraft, to the defense systems below. The sky became chaos. Targets appeared where nothing existed. Missiles chased illusions. Explosions occurred in empty air. And the real threat? It remained exactly where it wanted to be. Untouched, unseen, unstoppable. As confusion spread across the defense network, the next phase of the operation began. Far from the coastline, hidden deep within mountainous terrain, another critical asset was preparing to engage. A weapons platform capable of changing the balance of power in seconds. If launched successfully, it could threaten everything in the region, but it would never get the chance, because the aircraft was already on approach. And this time, it wasn't just targeting infrastructure. It was targeting the future of the battlefield itself. Deep inside the mountains, time was running out. The facility, buried beneath layers of granite and reinforced shielding, was never meant to be vulnerable. It was designed to survive airstrikes, bunker busters, even sustained bombardment. And yet, at this very moment, it was being watched, not by satellites alone, not by drones, but by something far more precise. A system that had already mapped every tunnel, every chamber, every structural weakness hidden beneath the rock. Inside the command chamber, Russian technicians worked under pressure. They knew the window was closing. 3 hypersonic missiles stood ready, each capable of traveling at speeds that would leave even the most advanced naval defenses struggling to respond. These weren't just weapons. They were strategic equalizers. If launched successfully, they could force the U.S. fleet to retreat, or worse. But there was a problem. They didn't know they had already been targeted. High above the mountain range, invisible against the night sky, the B-21 Raider adjusted its trajectory. No radio chatter, no urgency, no hesitation. Inside the cockpit, everything was calm, because the outcome had already been calculated. The weapons bay opened. 2 massive penetrators dropped into the darkness. No flames, no noise, just gravity taking over. Within seconds, both bombs aligned themselves mid-air. Guidance systems activated, angles corrected, velocity increasing rapidly. Then impact. The first penetrator struck the mountain with such force that the shock wave rippled across the entire ridge. Solid rock fractured instantly as the weapon drove deeper, cutting through layers that were supposed to be impenetrable. It didn't explode. Not yet. It kept going. 3 seconds later, the second bomb entered the exact same hole. Precision beyond human capability. And then everything changed. The detonation came from deep below the surface. A violent, expanding pressure wave surged through tunnels and chambers, collapsing walls, igniting fuel reserves, and tearing through anything in its path. The second explosion followed instantly, amplifying the destruction. Inside the facility, there was no escape, no warning, no survival. Above ground, the mountain itself reacted. A column of fire and debris erupted into the sky. Rock metal and flame launched hundreds of feet into the air. The shock registered across the region. Seismic sensors picked it up as a localized earthquake. And just like that, the threat was gone. Back in the air, the aircraft didn't wait to confirm. It already knew. The system updated the target status automatically. Neutralized. The bay doors closed. The aircraft banked away. And once again, it disappeared. But this strike did more than destroy a facility. It sent a message. Within minutes, a secure transmission reached Moscow. No threats. No theatrics. Just evidence. Audio recordings. Sonar signatures. Satellite imagery. Precise coordinates. Proof that their covert operation had been exposed from the very beginning. Proof that their submarines, hidden beneath layers of ocean and thermal shielding, were no longer hidden at all. And then came the ultimatum. Surface immediately. Withdraw from the region. Or be engaged. No ambiguity. No negotiation. Just a countdown. For the first time in the entire operation, the advantage shifted. Because now, the invisible players were visible. And once exposed, they became vulnerable. Inside the submarines, the situation changed instantly. They were no longer hunters. They were targets. Emergency protocols activated. Ballast systems engaged. The vessels began rapid ascent procedures. Breaking the surface wasn't part of the plan. It was a last resort. But staying submerged was no longer an option, because somewhere out there, weapons were already tracking them. Within minutes, both submarines surfaced. Silent, still, defeated without ever firing a shot. And just like that, they turned away, retreating from the region, leaving behind everything they were sent to protect. On the Iranian side, the shift was immediate. Support was gone. Coordination collapsed. And what remained was desperation. With their strategic assets destroyed and their defenses compromised, there was only one option left. A final, overwhelming attack. Fast attack craft launched in waves. Dozens of small, high-speed boats surged into the water, armed with anti-ship missiles and prepared for close-range engagement. Their objective was simple: close the distance, overwhelm the defenses, strike before they could be stopped. From above, the formation looked chaotic, unpredictable, dangerous, but to the systems tracking them, it was already solved. From the carrier deck, a squadron of advanced fighters launched into the sky. Within moments, they were airborne, climbing rapidly and spreading out across the engagement zone. Their sensors activated, and instantly, every single boat was identified. Speed, direction, weapon loadout, threat level, all of it processed in seconds. But the pilots didn't rush. They didn't dive into combat. They didn't even approach the boats directly, because they didn't need to. Instead, they launched their weapons from a distance. Long-range, intelligent systems designed to operate independently after release. Once deployed, the missiles began to communicate, not with the pilots, not with command, but with each other. They shared data, assigned targets, adjusted trajectories, each one selecting its objective based on priority, not proximity, not randomness, but threat level. The most dangerous boats were targeted first. As the missiles descended to low altitude, they became nearly invisible to radar. Moving just above the water, they closed the distance rapidly. And then, one by one, the impacts began. Explosions erupted across the formation. Boats disappeared in seconds. Some never even saw what hit them. Others tried to maneuver, but it didn't matter, because this wasn't a battle. It was a system executing a solution. From above, the pilots watched the engagement unfold on their displays. Each confirmed hit marked instantly. Each target removed from the map. Within minutes, most of the swarm was gone. The few remaining vessels attempted to retreat, turning back toward the coastline, trying to escape. But the operation wasn't finished. Helicopters moved in. Low altitude, high speed. They tracked the fleeing boats easily. And within moments, the final strikes were delivered. Silence returned to the water. No debris fields. No prolonged fight. No drawn-out engagement. Just absence. In less than a single operational window, everything had changed. The defenses that were supposed to hold had collapsed. The strategies built over decades had failed in hours, and the technologies that were once considered dominant had been rendered obsolete. Because this wasn't just a conflict of forces. It was a conflict of eras. On one side, traditional systems, volume-based tactics, reliance on visibility and reaction. On the other, integration, autonomy, control of the invisible domains, data, signal, perception. And in that kind of battlefield, the outcome isn't decided when the first shot is fired. It's decided long before that. In the preparation, in the positioning, in the unseen moves that shape everything that follows. By the time the first explosion happened, the result was already locked in. And that's the reality of modern warfare. If you're being targeted, you won't know. If you're being tracked, you won't see it. And if the system decides you are a threat, then the outcome has already been written. You're just waiting for it to happen.